Ameya sir has been designated as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum. He is also a writer and the author of the Rock Babas and Other Stories, a book of short stories published by Amazon and sold in over 40 countries globally. Ameya sir is a BSc in Economics, Politics, International Studies, and from the University of Warsaw, and the MSc in Finance Management and from Ivy Business School, Madrid. Mr. Ameya sir is also a partner in UAP Advisor LLP, a financial service, principal investing, and sustainability focused strategy advisor firm. UAP's investments includes a rural financial lending business along with ICICI Bank and NH Group of Korea, Draslovka, India, the Indian arm of the Czech company of Draslovka, the world's leading cyanide company, Prana, a the joint venture with the Protec Group of Russia that has an IoT performance of the energy and oil and gas sector. Furthermore, UAP has invested in startups in the healthcare, Ayurvedic, food, cosmetics, and other sectors. UAP sustainability practice focuses on clean energy and e-mobility and has leading India and global firms and its clients. It's an honor to have you with us, Mr. Ameya Prabhu, sir. With a huge round of applause, let us welcome. And this gets more delightful as we have Mr. Vishal sir, who will be in the conversation with Mr. Ameya. Mr. Vishal sir, Center Director, GEB Education. He is a management graduate. He is a certified trainer for exams like IELTC by British Council and for TOELF FL by ETC. Having experience of sending students to various countries, he specialized in researching about various universities and the courses offered by them across the globe. Over 15 years, he has counseled hundreds of students and helped them achieve their goals by studying abroad. I once again welcome you both. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the support of Westland Publication as the association is valuable OCLF. Now, my dear audience, you are about to experience a conversation with an extremely dynamic individual. So, without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Mr. Vishal sir to lead us ahead. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much for your kind words for us. Today will really be exciting because the topic itself is rock barbers. So everyone, I'm sure, is ready to rock with the ideas what the book has to share and the kind of different stories were there by Mr. Ameya Prabhu himself. During pandemic, of course, every one of us has evolved differently, and so has he, I believe, because he has written this book during the lockdown period. And the inspiration where it comes from and all of the things, I would like him to start with the first thing. Where does this book title comes from, Rock Barbers?
Thank you for having me, and really nice to be back in Nagpur after many years. And first thing, I would like to thank the organizers of the Orange City Lit Fest, as well as all of you who've come here today for having me. And it's a great honor to be back in the tiger and orange capital of the world, and also the center of our great nation. So really an honor to be here. Just to answer your question, so the book is actually a book of 9 short stories, and each story is based in a particular part of the world. We have stories based in India, we have stories based in Colombia, we have stories in Nepal, which is the Rock Babas, Japan, and so the Rock Babas is one of the stories, and it's basically a story of a Swiss hotelier who gets lost in the Himalayas while climbing the Kanchenjunga, and then he wakes up and he's rescued by a bunch of a group of rock music playing holy men called the Rock Babas, and the rest of the story is how he evolves with them, how he grows as a person, how he grows as an individual. In a way, it's his metamorphosis that we detail in the story. But so the Rock Babas are I hope they exist somewhere. They're a secretive bunch of rock music playing Babas, I would say, up in the Himalayas on Kanchenjunga, and the stories about them and his growth with them. And I love the titles of the Rock Babas. So hence I decided to call the book The Rock Babas and Other Stories because I thought that it's a good it's a cool name, I would say.
That's a lot to, there's a lot I'm sure to share from the book. And this lockdown has definitely made people speak their heart out. And this rock baba was somewhere already in your hearts, or it just came out of nothing.
So I've always been a writer. Back in school, I wrote a play which I directed. If you just look online, you'll see articles published in the Huff Post, in Quint, and this. I mean, that's more fiction. If you see stuff on Business Today, etc., would be more on the economy and stuff. So I've always been a writer, and I wanted to write a book, but I'm sure among the students there are a lot of budding authors and writers. That's why you've taken your Sunday out and to come to a lit fest instead of, to be honest, I really admire all of you. Take a Sunday out and listen to various authors speak at a lit fest. And no, because people often ask me, what is the trick to writing? And according to me, writing is maybe 20% talent and 80% discipline. So you actually need a lot of discipline for you to sit down, write, actually focus on doing a book. And to be honest, I also run a business. I run a financial services business, and you really need a lot of time to write a book. So it's always been in the works. I've always wanted to write a book. I was keen to write it, but I've never had the time. So the lockdown, in a way, a lot of us became home bakers. A lot of us, started making banana bread. Others were, I also heard of someone who made homemade beer, and luckily they did not, it was not so bad. But I think the real key of at least, so I chose to be an author. I chose that I wanted to take this time out and fulfill a lifelong dream of having my book. So I worked towards it, and as I said, it's 80% is real sheer discipline that you need to write so many words in such a period of time. And so any of you, I think anyone can become an author, but just be ready for the long, hard grind of writing. And it takes, I mean, I have almost 100,000 words, it's 1 lakh words. It was a lot of effort to write, I must admit. But I mean, I'm very happy that I did it.
Surely will be interacting with him with a lot more questions, but I have already. But I would request all the audiences to be prepared with their questions, and probably can search for the book itself and ask the questions once. I try to finish with my discoveries with him today. Book has at least 9 stories into it. So do you wanted to restrict it to 9 stories, or there some more coming up in the coming days?
I consider 9 to be a very lucky number. So when I was writing the stories, I initially thought I'd write 10. And because I wanted it to be novel length, so I mean, you need to have a certain length on a book. So the idea was to write, so I have maybe 25 ideas for stories, I still have a lot more. But, and I probably think of some idea and I jot it down and I write it. But I think the idea was that, maybe I reduced the number and actually shortlisted 12 ideas. So I was thinking of writing either 10 or 12. But when I wrote the 9th story, it just felt right. I felt the book was the right length, right size. I conveyed what I wanted to convey, and so it just felt right. So that's when I said, let me let now halt. That this is the right size of a book. So that's why there are 9 short stories. Each short story, as I said, is unique. Maybe we can, if people are interested, we can even discuss some of the stories and what they have. So let's say the first story in the book, not the first one I wrote, but the first one, the way the book reads, it's called the Accidental Philanthropist. And the story starts off with a Japanese billionaire who is very, very rich but not very liked. So he's wealthy but not popular, and he's also estranged from his daughter. He's a very lonely man. And he's turning 75, so he decides to throw a big party for his 75th birthday. And he does a routine health checkup. And during this health checkup, it turns out that the doctor comes and tells him is that his name is Watanabe-san. That Watanabe-san, I'm very sorry, but I have to break the news to you that you're very ill and you're going to die very soon. And I'm really sorry. So then this is like a life-changing experience for the guy, right? So he's like, from being this, because most of us, if you read one of the stories in the Panchatantra, someone asked, it's called Yudhishthira at the lake, And the Yaksha asked Yudhishthira that what is the greatest miracle on earth? And Yudhishthira says the greatest miracle on earth is that we see people dying all around us every day, but we think we'll live forever. And that is the greatest miracle on earth. And so same thing was with Watanabe-san. He always thought that he would live forever. So when he was faced with this diagnosis that he's terminally ill, he decides to make amends. So he throws a big party for his 75th birthday. He writes to his daughter that please come, and everyone who's of Japan is there. And then at this party, he announces that he's giving his entire fortune to charity. So suddenly he's a hero. Suddenly his daughter and him are like happily back together. He's spending time with his grandparents, or grandchild. He's like Japan's equivalent of Time Man of the Year. Sorry, he's Japan's equivalent of Time Man of the Year. He's a social media star. He's on Snapchat, on Instagram, everywhere. Everybody loves him. So things are going great for Watanabe-san for once in his life. So for the first time, not only is he successful, he's also very loved. And then the doctor calls him and says, I'm so sorry, Watanabe-san, but I actually mixed up the reports, and it turns out you're very, very healthy. You're going to live till 100. So I'm really sorry. So now he's furious because suddenly he's going to live forever and he doesn't want to give his money away. He wants all the money he gave to charity, he wants it back. So the rest of, and of course, if he does that, he's going to again betray his daughter, right? The one that he finally got back with. So the rest of the story is about his journey. What does he choose? Does he choose wealth or does he choose being loved? Does he choose again this material wealth or does he choose family life? So, and I mean, all of us face these dilemmas, right? So the story, if you see the stories, one of the reasons I set them up all around the world in Japan and Colombia and the US, again, speaking about the local cultures, is a few of the themes which I wanted to say that all of what these characters go through is nothing new. It can happen to any one of you. It can happen to all of us. And the idea was to set them up in different regions, different cultures, different religions, is to actually ultimately show that we're all human. Ultimately, we're all human, we're all the same. In India, we say we are from Nagpur, Vidarbha, Konkan, Delhi, Gujarat. Ultimately, we're all the same. So similarly, that's the theme that I wanted to bring out through my book. And hence, a lot of people ask me why are the characters based all over the world, and that's the reason. So, the Accidental Philanthropist, because he's the Accidental Philanthropist, is I would say one of my favorite stories in the book. It's the first story, and similarly, that's how the stories were titled. The idea to me came from thinking that you see this, Warren Buffett gives away so much money, Jeff Bezos gave away so much money. So I also always think that what if they want it back? What if they regret giving away the money one day? And that's how the story evolved from that. And similarly, each story has a certain root or a certain thought from which it has evolved. And today it's an anthology of 9 short stories. As I said, I was born also at 9:09 a.m. So I consider 9 to be a very lucky number. So that's why we stuck to 9. So it's a roundabout answer to a very simple question. But thank you.
The first story itself is so interesting. I'm sure every one of us will now be very careful, especially when going to doctors and checking our reports. No one would want to get their fortune away.
I'm sure a lot of people have got fake COVID, as in like incorrect COVID reports as well in the last. I have so many friends who got antigen was positive, RT-PCR was negative. So I guess one thing which all of us know after COVID is that please be careful of the report you are getting and always do another test, because you never know if it's correct or not.
This definitely gives us a more clear idea as to how interesting the other stories would be in the book. Anything which is your favorite part of the book?
I think, to be honest, the favorite part of the book was actually the journey writing it. Because I learned so much about myself while writing the book. I learned, and again, and as I said, this wisdom that I'm sharing, that it's 20% talent, 80% discipline, actually came out of, because it's very romantic, right? I want to write a book, I want to make a movie, I want to do a painting, and I think the hard work that goes behind it, even a photographer who says there's a lot of hard work that he has to do to, ensure. So anything that is creative, anything that is talent, needs a lot of work behind it. So I think for me, I grew a lot as a human being while writing the book, and I think that for me was great. And in terms of stories, honestly, I think all of the stories are cool. I do hope at least 1 or 2 of them in the future can be made into a web series or a movie. And maybe the Rock Babas, maybe the Accidental Philanthropist. That's the aim, and it's been written quite descriptively so that people can also envision or imagine that. But yeah, so I mean, I don't really have a favorite story to be honest. But if you ask me which one do I tilt towards, there is a story called Manifestations of Anpao, which is Anpao is it's a story based in the US. Anpao is the Native American god of dawn, so it's both night and day. And it's a story about an actor who think of, say, a Heath Ledger or closer to home, an Amir Khan, an actor who goes so deep into his character that he can't get out of it. So he actually starts becoming that character. And it's also in a way my own, I don't know how many of you have read Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was one of my favorite stories growing up. So it's in a way my own to that story as well. And again, I wanted to explore with what happened with say, Heath Ledger after The Dark Knight, that I also felt he became so deep into that character, which was a very dark, screwed up character, but also very relatable for him. So it was in a way my ode to that. So, and I think it really explores the dark side of humanity because I believe that all of it's like fire, right? Fire can be used to cook foods, fire can be used to make steel, which is the strongest thing in the world, but fire can also burn down a house. Similarly, our mind is the same. Either we can use our mind for positive, we can use our mind for good, we can do good for the world, good for nature, good for people, or we can use it negatively. So that's why the book was actually, it's all of us have good and bad in us, right? Each and every one of us. It's only the question of which, as a Native American proverb says, it's about there are two wolves inside all of us. One is good, one is the good, one is positive, one is happy, the other is ego, negativity, etc. And then ask which wolf wins. He says the one you feed. So similarly, the one that the side of us that we let blossom. And I think that's the message, right? Let's focus on positivity. Let's focus on doing good. Let's focus on actually making a positive change, leaving this world a better place than we came into. And I think that was the story which I'm trying to convey. So in a way, I think that does have a lot of resonance above and beyond just a simple piece of literature. So maybe I would say I would tilt towards that story, but I don't really have a favorite as such.
Normally, when you speak to authors, they would like to speak their heart out. So, while writing, I'm sure when you read the book, you will get to know that the stories are really short one, more crisp one. So, is it like you purposely did it, or it's like you restricted your heart to the words?
Yeah, I think everyone in the audience, we have a primarily young audience here. I think everyone would agree that आजकल attention span बहुत कम हो गया है. मतलब एक घंटा बैठना भी डिफिकल्ट हो जाता है, 40 मिनट बैठना. तो एक पूरी किताब पढ़ना, तो पूरी नॉवेल पढ़ना भी. Who will read a Crime and Punishment of Dostoevsky 1000-word किताब today, right? It's very difficult. It's difficult for me, and I'm a reader. So I think the idea was the stories were based for the modern reader. I wanted the stories to not be more than 30 pages long. You can read one on a flight, you can read one, on an evening. Most people can read it over a couple of hours if you're an avid reader, maybe 3 hours if it's longer. And the next story is not connected to the previous story. So you can then pick it up and read it whenever you want again. Season 2 देखने के लिए season 1 की जरूरत नहीं. That was the idea. So I think the modern reader is one who doesn't have the time, honestly, to be able, or more importantly, the attention span to read an entire novel. So the idea was to give them short snippets. That's why movies today don't do as well as a web series. A 30-45 minute web series, people watch a lot more than a 3 घंटे का picture for things. So I think the idea is to be able to give people, say, let's say, consume literature which is easier for them to consume in shorter snippets, and that's why short stories. A lot of my publishers told me that nobody reads short stories. I said that I disagree. I think I would love to read short stories because that's a format which is a lot easier to read. It's a lot quicker to read. You can do it while doing other things. You have, if you're a doctor, you have to read massive manuals on medicine. If you're an economist, you have to read about all sorts of moderation, auctioneer, and all sorts of stuff. So when it comes to something you want to have fun with, read it in short doses. So that was the idea. It was a conscious decision to focus on short stories. And I've got good feedback, so I guess it was the correct decision. And again, there are people like T20, people like now Test cricket also. I think Mayank would agree that Test cricket is the best, but I think ultimately there's a market for everything.
I'll keep on continuing with my questions, but if in the audience anyone has any questions, they're not related to the book only because Ameya is a person to learn from. He comes from a background which is really huge, and still is so humble and kind to speak with such humility and kind words like for everyone. So, anyone has any questions in between? So,
India has a question.
Sir, I have a simple question for you. Who are your favorite authors or writers, and which book you are influenced by most?
Oh, so that's a very good question. I think I'm someone who likes to read diverse stuff. So when I was growing up, I used to love reading a lot of stuff on, like for example, I love Franz Kafka. I really liked Albert Camus. I loved a lot of these existential authors. I went through that phase. I mean, I guess my favorite author depends on which time of my life you talk about, right? I think when I was even younger, I used to love Sherlock Holmes. So I thought there was no better author in the world than Arthur Conan Doyle. Then, as I grew older, I started reading different things. So I love Kurtzer from South Africa. I also started reading a lot of. Actually, I started reading a lot of non-fiction. So I started reading a lot of history. Like even right now, if you ask me the book I'm reading, it will not interest 99.999% of the world. It's the ancient history of Mongolia from the 500 AD to now, and which is very interesting because when you read history, you learn a lot about humanity. Like for example, we know about Genghis Khan, but Kabul Khan was his great grandfather, and the word Kabul, which is today the capital of Afghanistan, is nothing to do with an Afghan name or nothing to do with even a Persian name. It's actually a Mongol name who were animists. They used to worship nature. So it's now like the etymology of names, which really interests me as well. So I read a wide variety of things. I mean, if you see these days, George R. Martin is all the rage, and I love his work. I think it's phenomenal what he's done as well. So I think I think I've always liked to read from a wide array of people. I mean, I even love Amish, for example, Amish Tripathi and what he did with his books. I think Amish is a friend. We share the same publisher, and I think he's a phenomenal author. I mean, he's created an entire genre on his own, mythology as to for it to be. So I think he's a phenomenal author. If you read some of the even a couple of the Pakistani authors are very good. If you read like say the case of exploding mangoes, which is a great. So I think the great thing about literature is you learn a lot about the country, you learn a lot about the people. I used to love reading ancient texts, like I used to love reading Ulysses. I used to also read. I read the Kalidasa, which was again amazing. So Kalidasa's book. So I think it's amazing what you can achieve by and again the one good thing about literature again is it's timeless, right? I mean, if you ask me, you can read a 3,000-year-old book today, which I think very few things can achieve that what art and literature can. Human beings we have a very short span of life, but even if you look around you, the artifacts which were built in the past, I think I think you should read what gives you inspiration, and I think at different points in my time, that inspiration has varied. So right now, if you ask me, I'm reading a lot of history, a lot of history, a lot of economics. I shouldn't say that as a fiction author because I write primarily fiction, but I'm reading that, and I'll probably start another book next week. But yeah, that's thank you. Anyone else? Any questions?
You can ask anything, I'm sure. Like, he is person who can answer any question probably.
You can ask what I had for lunch if you want to. The answer is nothing, but anyway.
Coming from when you have studied finance and management and also into finance as a profession, what made you not write about finance or inspiration? Because you have written this book during COVID time, where people were struggling for finances and earnings. So something like
that. I think to be honest, I like to put my life in different buckets. So I have a work bucket and I have a creative bucket. So I try not to mix the two. I do write on finance and economics from time to time. So I've written for the Business Today, I've written for the Quint, I've written for some of the various publications on the budget and stuff. But I don't know if I really see myself writing a book on finance. I don't, because I think there are, to be able to write a book on finance, you need to be a PhD or an authority on finance. You need to be someone who can, I think there are far more better qualified people in this world who can write on finance and economics than I am. There are some phenomenal, economists in this world. But I think what I do see myself writing in the non-fiction side is I do want to write more on history. I think that interests me a lot. And so I might consider writing something there, or maybe something to do with economics and history, because I think to learn the economic history of the world is also very important. I mean, if you look at India, of the last, I'm only because we are a very ancient country, but even if you only look at the last 2000 years, for almost 1700 years, we've been the largest economy in the world, first or the second, along with China. So when I used to go, I speak on a lot of global forums, so they used to say that, what do you think of India as an emerging economy? I said, we're not emerging, we are re-emerging. You know, we are just coming back to what is rightfully ours, because the West has a very short viewpoint. They're very narrow, very, I mean, they only look at the last 300 years. Because, I mean, the Americans look at it because that's when they were formed. But if you look at, and 2000 years is very short for India. You know, if you really think about it, we are a 10,000 year old nation. But even, like really narrowing it down to 2000 years. And when you narrow it down to 2000 years, you don't even include Chandragupta Maurya, you don't even include Ashoka, you don't even include Samudragupta, and all of those kings, which is again, that time India was one of the global centers of learning and economy. So I want to write more, and I think there's a great author that we have called Sanjeev Sanyal, who wrote a couple of very interesting books. He wrote a book on the Indian Ocean and the history of the Indian Ocean and the economy, and he also wrote a book called The Land of Seven Rivers. Again, it was called The History of India's Geography, but as a byproduct, you have economics or economy and related to that. Great books. I would highly recommend you read it because you learn so much about your own country, which again has been distorted with time. As Winston Churchill once said, in history, he who is left is right. So जो बचता है वो सही है, so to say. And I think that's the thing with history, right? So I think it's very important to have a very strong perspective. So I do see in the future writing something on history from I would say not just an Indian perspective, but from an Asian and African perspective, because we've not had so many of our authors write history our way without actually being, I would say, having a bias of say of the West. So I think it's important to do that.
He's a person who comes from a finance background, writing about fictions and aspiring to write about history. Something more about the culture of India also will be.
So whenever even if you read my short stories, whenever I write a story about any place, be it India, within India, again, India is very broad, right? I mean, Vidarbha itself has such a deep history, and if you think about it. But what I do is, whenever I write about any place, I focus on four very important elements of that place. One is the geography of that place; it's very important. So even if you see the rock babas, it focuses a lot. The place called Tapleganj in Nepal, and that's where the base camp walk starts towards Kanchenjunga. So throughout that region, there are Kirati people there are Limbu people there. These are all indigenous people of that area. They also are on our side of the border in Sikkim and in northern Bengal in Darjeeling and in that area, Gorkhaland as we call it. So one thing is I focus on the geography. Second is I focus on the culture. I also focus a lot on the indigenous people of that area, which are very important because I think it's very, very important to respect not just the indigenous people, but their culture and their ways and belief, and also the history of that place. So I think not just India, I mean, wherever I write about, it could be Nepal, it could be not just Nepal, let's say Eastern Nepal, it could be Japan, it could be Colombia, it could be the US, because the entire story is on Native Americans, which are the Cheyenne, which is one of the Native American tribes, and the Sioux and the Cheyennes who are the Apaches. So I did a lot of research on these Native Americans who, as we all know, after the colonization of the US by people from Western Europe, 90% of these people were wiped off. It was, if you ask me, one of the largest unsaid genocides in the history of the world. And I think it's very important again to focus on these people because I think one thing I would like to also do through literature is give voice to people who don't necessarily have a voice. I mean, say for example, and for instance, you spoke about culture. Now let's say which is the highest mountain in the world, right? If you ask anyone out here, including everyone, will say Mount Everest. But Mount Everest was only named in 1880 after the founder of the Topographical Society of India, Sir, Mr. Everest. But for thousands of years, the Tibetans of that area have been calling it, the local name of Mount Everest. So why should we go and call it, why should we go and call it Everest, whereas you could actually call it, by the name that has been referred to it for ages, And so again, when you spoke about culture of a region, I think we always want to, similar, I saw that in Africa, like you have a lake called Lake Victoria, which has various names in the local languages of the area. Let us call it that, right? Like we went to Victoria Falls, which is known as Mose Otunya in the local language. But again, everybody calls it Victoria Falls. So I think it's very important to focus on the culture of that region, wherever you are in the world, and give respect to that culture. Rather than us going and imposing our culture on others, let us learn from each of these beautiful, various, diverse cultures that exist and learn from them. Because I think that's way we can really create a very cohesive society. You know?
Something from this book which suddenly came into my mind was dog babas are the ones which are imaginary characters which suddenly evolved when this mountain went up. And they used to connect with God and.
Well, in the book, they're not imaginary, yeah? They're actual, they are work of fiction.
But people used to just believe that something of that kind existed. So, does Ameya as well has something of this kind of in them, like, when he gets connected with the extra energies, which inspires him to write or something.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, I think so. The Rock Baba, as many as this, when he wakes up in this cave on Kanchenjunga, there are secretive bunch of monks who play rock music and connect with the higher energy. And I think it's very interesting. So I meditate twice a day. I meditate in the morning and in the evening. And for me, that's my way to detach and my way to, I would say, connect with the energy that surrounds us. I also write, so when I write, I actually also feel connected, and I see that a lot in artists. Or actually, if you ask me, a chef who's very good at what he does, who's a phenomenal, brilliant chef, that's his way of connecting with the energy there is. There is a artist who is, or maybe some people do it through running. So I think my thing is find something you love to do. It could be anything, it could be absolutely anything. It could be even teaching economics at, Rice University, I think it could be anything, but I think connect with what you love to do. Connect with whatever art you have, and I think that's your platform to connect with the energy that exists around us. Because, I think that's, at least for me, that's personally very important, and I've always had the greatest creative inspirations when I've been in that zone. So, for me, it's meditation really changed my life. So has writing. But again, people don't have to. Others can do whatever. Find what you love. Do it with 100% passion, and you will elevate yourself to a different level. That's something which I've personally experienced, and it's been something which has been great for me.
Lot, but still the time restricts us. Anyone has any questions, please come up.
Two questions. Is there a mic so someone can listen or something? Or just. What I was going to say, you can just be loud, but I think mics are better.
So you said that writing a book is 80% discipline and 20% talent. So one day I would like to write a book of my own. So my question is, what were the difficulties that you faced while writing this book, and how did you overcome?
Well, I hope that one day comes soon to start with, and you write. The greatest difficulty in writing a book is about what do I write. That is, if you ask me, it's with everything in life, right? I mean, after all you guys pass out of college, the greatest difficulty will be what do I do with my life? So finding that path is very difficult, and once you are on that path, it becomes a lot easier to, I would say, travel that path. So there will be difficulties on that path. You'll fall, you'll stumble, there will be thorns, but you'll walk because you know which path to go on. So I think the first step towards writing something is thinking about what am I going to write about. Is it fiction? Is it non-fiction? If it is fiction, is it a novel? Is it a play? Is it a short story? So I think choosing that is the first step. Once you're on that, which is the broader way, or maybe another way to start it is, what is the theme I want to write about? Do I want to write about my life, my journey? Do I want to speak about a theme? And once you've chosen the theme, you choose the medium. Once you've chosen the theme and the medium, I would say 80%, 50% of your work is done, because at least you know which path to walk on. Challenges will be many. You'll have writer's blocks. You'll be stuck. If you ask me, one thing which I'll advise everyone is, once you're finished, you'll have a couple of iterations of your book. You will read it. You'll have edits, etc. Don't overdo it. Every time I read my book, I stop reading my book actually. But every time I read my book, I want to change something about it. Every time. There's something in the story I want to change, something in the plot I want to change, I want to use a different word. So, as a writer, your book will never be perfect. It'll never. I mean, I'm sure 5 years from now, if I read it, I still want to change something about it, right? But so I actually one day I said, okay, this is driving me crazy. Let me stop. Because also today it's very easy, right? Because Kindle editions can be changed immediately. I can just call my publisher, like, change these 4 things, and it gets changed on Kindle, and the next reprint is changed again. It's not like the good old days where there was a manuscript which you had to continuously keep. So I think it's important. And again, there's a lot of the writer's block is a big problem. If you want to finish your book in a specific period of time, which I did, you have to be disciplined in terms of doing it. And but again, the biggest, most difficult part is deciding what to write about. So I think you should ideate about that. And once you, and again, other thing is, if you feel maybe a couple of months into writing it that you want to choose a different path, that's totally okay. But I think it's important to start. And I think as you start, you'll also learn a lot about yourself. And I hope in a few years you'll be here at Orange City Lit Fest speaking about your book, and I'll be in the audience, and hopefully I can ask you a question about it at that time when I come. Thank you.
How do you choose your characters? Are they inspired by real people or are they imaginary altogether?
It's a mix, if you ask me. There is some inspiration of real people. Again, they're fictional versions of real people. So, for example, if you see the manifestation of Anpao that I spoke about, I really imagined what could happen to a character actor if he goes so deep into a dark character that he can't get out. Okay, now this is an imaginary concept, but it's your mind playing on you, right? So there, maybe I was inspired by maybe what happened to Heath Ledger after The Dark Knight, or what say a Daniel Day-Lewis goes through when he does every movie. So I think there was a bit of inspiration there. As I shared with you in The Accidental Philanthropist, I was like, all these guys giving away billions over their dollars. I was always thinking, what if somebody wants it back? So that's, again, it's not really inspired by someone, but there is a thought that sparks based on something you read or something that happens, right? As in, there's another story called Memoirs of a Dictator, which is based in Africa, and in a fictional African country called Swaganda. And the dictator is writing about his own memoirs. So the idea was everybody writes about dictators from their perspective. I always thought that a dictator always thinks he's not doing a bad job. So I wanted to write from his perspective. So I wrote that. Of course, in the end, I was short a couple of pages on a newspaper article that actually speaks about what the reality is. But of course, a dictator thinks everything is done is right. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong, right? And it's important to also read that perspective. So that was like a mixture of, say, Gaddafi, Idi Amin, Saddam Hussein. So I took like elements of a lot of these guys and created a brand new character. So it's a mix. They're all fictional characters. But there's some inspiration. Some characters are completely fictional. Like the Rock Babas are a complete work of fiction. In terms of, I do hope they exist somewhere in the Kanchenjunga on the Himalayas, but that's completely fiction. Thank you. I believe you had a question. You had. The gentleman there, maybe there's a lady. Okay, sure, she can go. Ladies first.
Sir, my question is, you are a writer as well as you own a company. So how do you balance your passion as well as your livelihood? Because your passion doesn't give you a bread and butter. Means like a guy in IT, he has to invest almost 15 hours a day. So how to manage the time for your passion as well as your job or anything?
That's an excellent question. I think everyone would dream that their passion becomes their job. You could play cricket for India, or play football for your favorite club, or become an. I think that's the dream. But you're right. Passions very more often than not don't pay the bills. So the honest answer is I don't balance it because I could only write the book when I was in a lockdown and I had the time to write it. If you ask me to write the same book again today, it will take a lot more time, and I think I would like to balance it. So I really would hope that I hope I can give you this answer in some time because right now I have not figured out how to balance both because work is so busy. Especially when I run a financial services business and I have to travel a lot for work. I came here from Calcutta last night. I'm going to Bombay tomorrow, and the work is so busy that it takes a lot of your time. So it's great to be able to. So I'm glad this is on a Sunday. And one good thing has been that because everything is digital now, it's a lot easier to balance because you can do a lot of events online. But I think it's not easy. I think if you really are passionate about something, you have because in life focus is very important. If you really want to excel in anything you do in life, you need serious amounts of focus. Otherwise, you will do everything half-hearted. So I think I was lucky I could focus on my book during the lockdown, and that's why I could get it out. if it was today, probably would be very different. Honest, that's the honest answer. I mean, I hope, I know that doesn't answer your question completely, but that's just the honest answer. Sorry.
I prefer that question and I asked that how many ways we can categorize the novel? Novel like on novel on a particular person who is already part of it, novel on a social, any society, novel on any particular place. So how many ways we can categorize the novel? This one is my first question. Second question.
I didn't understand your question. How do you categorize novelism?
Yes. How many ways we can categorize the novel? Novel on a particular person, like any historical person, or
Novel.
or any place, or any country, novel on a country, like you already told that Afghanistan or any other country.
Yeah.
The second question is if history is also a book and novel is also a book. If you are writing novel on a particular person who is a historical person, so what is the difference between novel and history?
The second question is a good question. I would say just to answer, I'll take your, history very often is also a novel because a lot of history has been written. I would say it's half fiction only, but it's actually a very, very. I mean, I think you asked a very philosophical question. What you asked, because ideally, I mean, in an idealistic situation, a history should be a factual representation of what actually happened, and novel usually tends to be fiction. Should be a fictional representation or what is the author's mind of what should be happening. Now, in reality, history also becomes fiction only because, as I quoted earlier, as Winston Churchill said, he who is left, who is right. The one who wins the war writes the history. You don't really write it from the other person's perspective. So, if you actually look at history, there's a lot of bias in history. And so if you ask me on a very fundamental level, a novel can be about anything. It can be about a country, it can be about a person, it can be about yourself, it can be about anything that strings the heart of an author is a novel. History should ideally be a factual representation of what happened, but I think given the way history is written in this world, including in our country, it is very biased. So that's why it was a joke when I was saying that history also has become fiction, become a novel. But ideally, in an ideal scenario, history is a factual representation of what happened, and a true historian should get multiple sources, multiple facts, speak to multiple people in order to get a good idea of what actually happened. Now, how do you do that for something that happened 1500 years ago? Impossible. So it's very difficult to have balance in history, but it's an attempt that an honest historian should have. And to answer your first question, I think you can have a novel for about anything here. I think a novel is whatever strings the heart of an author. And of course, the only thing is a lot of times the authors write things that nobody else in the world cares about. So I think secondary also what the people want to read. I think if one writes about something which is very, very vague, and I think it may not interest that many people because it's also important to get the publishers books selling. It's also important to keep your ultimately anything that is creative is success or failure is judged by the audiences or the readers' feedback. Thank you. I think there was a question there from the guy there. One more question. Sorry, please.
So I would like to ask that since you are a writer, can you suggest me any books about stock market? Because I am very interested in the basics of stock market.
I'll ask someone in my team to maybe give me your details. I'll ask someone who is more than me. I think they'll be. I don't read that. To be very honest, I don't read that much about the market, but I'll ask someone from. So give me your details.
Do you invest?
No, we do. We have a PMS business we invest, but we don't read. I'll be honest with you. If I give you a recommendation, it may not be the right one. So I'll get someone to get you one. Just give me your details after this, and it's. Any other questions, or shall we?
Would you like to come with your something to virtual form? What would be your comments for that?
No, so I think I alluded to that in my when I was speaking that certainly would want. The stories have been written in a way that it can be in multiple media. So you've chosen one media, which is print, and which is the book. I really see that this can definitely be in another platform, such as a movie, or at least some of the short stories, if not all. Like I think Manifestations of Anpao, Accidental Philanthropist, Rock Babas, maybe even Memoirs of a Dictator, sorry, to a certain extent. And I think all of them could potentially be made into a web series or a movie. So I think let's see, that's the idea. We have to, a friend of mine was talking to me about it. I need to follow up on that. So let's see. Hopefully we can convert this into another medium. So it has the potential. Let me put it that way. Of course, we'll have to expand it a bit because by definition these are short stories. So we'll have to expand the material a bit. But I think we can definitely do that. Thank you.
I'm sure there'll be a lot more curious people out here who probably are not asking, but I'm sure you'll probably search for them on social media and put up your questions in, and I'm sure you'll be kind enough to reply to those. With this, I would like to say thank you for all the information you've given about your book and all the wonderful knowledge you've shared with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being a great audience. At 2 p.m. after lunch is a tough time to be, so when they told me this is my slot, it's really humbling to see so many people in the audience, and thank you all of you for being here. I think it's amazing. I think it shows your passion for literature, so it's really an honor to be in front of you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Ameya Prabhu, sir, and Mr. Vishal Jain, sir, for joining us today. We wish we get to hear you all again and be equally enlightened as we all are today. And for my dear massive audience, I'm sure that often, after witnessing this conversation, you all are taking home an enriched perspective with you all today, just as I am. Thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again, this is Jun Jariwala signing off. Thank you.
Vision beyond.